Loving could be the best thing everyone could ever experience. And building a family with the one you love is a superb dream for almost everyone. It was also the dream of Dan Jones. Since young, he visualized himself being married to one he loves and build a family of his own that is blissful and peaceful. But what happens along the process of reaching this dream was tragic, even sending him behind bars. Innocent man sent to jail for rape by his own wife to be interesting, right? But before we get into it, please do me a favor by clicking the like and subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified anytime we release a new video. Going back, this is the story of Dan Jones and how he ended up being sent to jail by his own wife to be Sarah Jane Parkinson. Like other couples, their story started sweet. Dan comes from a decent family but never knew her background, which he gets to reveal in a most weird way. Now you might ask yourself, why am I telling this story? Well, I am trying to be straightforward, as I always do. Modern women have always been horrible. The rise of feminism has caused this. Back to the story. Dan met Sarah Parkinson 8 years ago. They were so in love with each other. Then Dan thought he would end up marrying her. Dan and Sarah had plans to buy their dream house while planning their wedding. However, Sarah started acting strange. She started making up stories about how Dan badly treated her. She even went to the police station to file a complaint of domestic violence and rape. Dan's dream house and dream wedding with Sarah was crushed. Dan was convicted and put in jail. But how did they meet? Why did their relationship end up like they are strangers? The two met in 2011, and they were both in their early 20s. Dan was working as an AFE canine instructor when he met her and fell in love with the kind, innocent, beautiful lady. Little laid-back airline employee Sarah Parkinson, who would not fall for this well-dressed and very presentable young lady. Dan and Sarah's relationship was perfect, but behind her perfection that attracts men is a mystery that can shatter their life into pieces. Because behind those beautiful dresses that she wore was a pathological liar. She started telling and making up stories about her troubled past, which worried Dan and his family. Despite knowing Sarah's history, the Johns accepted her, and Dan continued planning their wedding. No matter how many times and how strenuously Dan denied the allegations, Sarah was still able to put him behind bars. Dan's life was turned upside down. He started to live every person's nightmare, to be jailed for the crimes you did not commit. Dan spent 6 years in jail and hundreds of thousands of dollars to be freed. The truth was finally revealed thanks to one good cop, who was able to unmask Sarah, finally classifying her as one of the con artists. When Sarah changed her career from an airline employee to a clericalist at Gungahlin police station, her true colors started to show. She started to weave a web of lies and constantly claiming that she was a victim of violence. She went to work with her visible bruises and told her colleagues that Dan is abusing her. It will always be Dan, and not her heart condition caused the bruises. Due to a series of household accidents and injuries, her clumsiness became a joke as well. What Dan did not know is that police were already investigating him. After 2 years silently investigating Dan, Anthony Hill, the chief inspector, and Sarah's boss invited Dan for a quick chat at the police station. Dan, being suspicious, decided to bring his father, Ian Jones. The outcome seems not favorable to Dan and Ian. The police wanted to put an OVO against Dan, due to Sarah's allegations that Dan had been abusing her physically. What is worse was the inspector had 5 witnesses willing to testify against Dan for the crimes that he did not commit. Dan and Ian Jones, his father, could not believe what they'd heard. They started asking Sarah about the matter. On the other hand, Sarah was defended by her colleagues. Later, after a long discussion, Sarah assured Ian, her soon-to-be father-in-law, that it was a misunderstanding. Dan, in front of the chief police officer, agreed to never hurt Sarah, even though he had never even touched her before. But the situation started to get into Dan's head. Other concerns like infidelity were raised. He was crushed. He was crying. He was angry. He was furious. Who would not? You just bought a place and your wife-to-be just moved in, and yet you ended up in a situation that would change your life forever. After having and living the life that you once dreamed of, and once everything was going right, now completely going south in an instant. Sarah and Dan's relationship ended in 2013. Sarah started to file more complaints at Canberra's Gungahlin police station. If all allegations are true, Dan will be facing 32 counts of domestic violence, including rape. In 2014, Dan was arrested and lost everything. He lost his job, career, car, and house. Most importantly, his reputation. For Dan, it will cost him 20 years behind bars, and it will cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars to gain back his freedom. But after all, what his family did not expect is that a woman is working on their case, but she is no ordinary woman, Sergeant Lissette Alexander. She wasn't convinced that Dan was guilty of domestic violence. This is where the story gets interesting. For years, Sarah was backed up by the police. All of her claims were believed and said to be true. No one sees her as a suspect. Since day one, everyone sees her as a vulnerable victim of domestic violence. Then here comes a detective seeing her as a suspicious defendant, instead of a meek, innocent, and vulnerable victim. She now sees a video pattern of Sarah's claims, of persistent harassment, threats, and theft, including Dan's parents, Ian and Michelle, his brother. She was horrified after finding out that Sarah was nothing but a serial liar. The set of evidence the detective gathered was the key to Dan's freedom. Everything that can be used as evidence was recorded, including the timestamp of when they left their houses. This caught Sarah red-handed. All of her claims were staged. She made up stories against Dan. The break-in that she claimed as well was also staged. The knife that was used to assault her was her own knife. Sarah claimed that she lost her iPad, and she knew where it was. She reported the incident and informed the police that her iPad was at the Joneses' residence. This was a trigger to detectives. This led them to check Sarah's car. Thanks to new technology, the tracker saved Dan's case. The trackers showed that Sarah drove from her house to Dan's house to plant the iPad in their place. Weird, right? How modern women can do anything to break you down as a man. Let's go on with the story. Please remember to like this video and subscribe if you didn't. After a couple of months of working on the case, Dana was freed. He may not get his livelihood, career, or house back, but his tarnished reputation will be. Although the judiciary system destroyed Daniel's family, financially, physically, and emotionally, their family is still grateful. They may have spent a huge amount of money and caused Michelle and Daniel's marriage to fall apart. As parents, they were able to save their son's life from dying in jail for a crime that he did not commit. Dan was never found guilty, but proving his innocence cost almost $600,000 in cash. They should not have had to spend it in the first place. Let this story live and remind all men from different walks of life to carefully choose their partners for love, or choose to go their own way. This will give you freedom and happiness to do what you like in life. Remember, the choices we make in life today can be learned and can be unlearned, but the damage that can be done for choosing the wrong person can't be repaired. Worst, it may cost your life.